visits where they get Suboxone, they can get Vivitrol and Sublocade, and I'll tell you what those are. Suboxone is a strip or a pill that you can put under your tongue 2 to 3 times a day, and it helps you to not crave substance, opiates, and then you can, but you choose to take that every day. So we encourage people to get on the Sublocade, which is a shot once a month, and then you don't have to think about it because you're not going to get high, so you're just wasting your money. So that's the way I approach it anyway. Vivitrol is, and that's a partial blocker of the receptor sites. So Vivitrol is a shot that you get in your buttocks, and that's a once a month shot, and that is a complete blocker. So that also helps with alcohol cravings, and you also don't get the message to your brain. So your body would feel the effects, but your brain won't. So it's like watching yourself drunk, and it's not a pretty sight. So people opt for that quite often too. In our facility, in our organization, we have an outpatient clinic also here in Lynnwood. We have an inpatient facility in Mount Vernon for men, and one for women and children and pregnant women in Everett. Sorry, lost for a minute. We also have, we work with the LEAD program with the police department and the HOST program, where we go out to the homeless and see what their needs are medically and also with substance use or misuse.
My name is Cole Langdon. I'm a deputy chief here with the police department. I've been working here for 25 years. So excited to be up here again on a panel, continuing the conversations we had before. And I'm going to yield a lot of my time because Sergeant Poole is actually out doing the work daily that I had an opportunity to do for about 3 years, about 5 years ago now. What I can tell you is when we start talking about these complex issues, a lot of those issues land at the doorstep of law enforcement, fire, and the emergency department. Those are the 3 services in our community that cannot say no, and we're the ones that get called. So a lot of times when things don't fit into a neat box, we're the ones that get called and we're asked to try and address the issue. When I started in the job, we did not have great answers, and I can't say that we have perfect answers yet, but our answers are getting better because we recognize that all of these issues are complex and they require a multidisciplinary approach to even attempt to solve them. A lot of my passion resides in working on these issues as upstream as possible before we get that person who is deeply entrenched or deeply within the grasp of addiction and now living houseless out there on the street. So that's where you see a lot of my passion, and I also recognize that this work isn't going anywhere anytime soon. We're gonna have to continue to collaborate, we're gonna have to continue to find innovative solutions, and the community involvement, community engagement is so important. So what we'd like to see are these crowd sizes growing, because this is an urgent issue and we actually need some activation around these issues. And so thank you for being here tonight, and I'm again gonna yield the rest of my time.
Hi, my name is Ashley Dawson. I'm the Program Director for Snohomish County LEAD. LEAD stands for Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. It's a program that has been in Snohomish County for 3.5 years. And essentially, our team works with people who are committing low-level misdemeanor crimes. They're cycling through the legal system, and they're struggling with substance use disorders, mental health issues, and are living in extreme poverty. So our program gives police officers the opportunity to divert someone away from jail at the time of arrest and instead into the LEAD program, which then provides long-term intensive case management. So our case managers go straight to the police officer or the person wherever they are for a warm handoff, and then work really closely with them to connect them to appropriate resources and services, and are there for the time-intensive needs. So sitting in the waiting room of a doctor's office, helping a person to work through their court issues, providing transportation to important appointments, and hopefully eventually leading to some sort of treatment or therapy, medication, whatever it is the person decides makes sense for them. Then our team is really working with them on their goals. We operate from a harm reduction approach, meaning we meet people where they are, and then they kind of decide what makes sense for them. So we help them to recognize the harm that they may be doing to themselves, but then also those around them. So to be in the LEAD program, a person doesn't have to stop using right away. Instead, we say, let's work with you right here where you are, non-judgmental, and then we kind of work step by step at the person's pace to get to whatever is next for them. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Stradling. I'm the Behavioral Health Director at Community Health Center of Snohomish County. We're a federally qualified nonprofit health center, and we have clinics here in Lynnwood, Edmonds, all the way up to Arlington. We have medical care, dental care, pharmacy, physical therapy, and relevant to today's topic, behavioral health care. Also, our program is intended by the federal government to serve people with low income, uninsured, Apple Health, Medicaid, Medicare, people with, like I said before, without insurance at all. You get a sliding fee scale based on income. There's no charge for medical care for homeless people. We all know that a lot of mental health care starts in the doctor's office, through primary care physicians, prescribing antidepressants, etc. And then they refer into our team for counseling and maybe specialized sessions with a psychiatric nurse practitioner. We have social workers that assist patients in getting connected to resources in the community. And we have a substance use disorder specialist who supports our medication-assisted treatment program. Great explanation on what that is, thank you, so we'll go over that again. But we really believe that coming and getting treatment in a primary care office is helpful in reducing stigma and helps people feel comfortable talking about their issues. I think that'll be it for now. I'll pass the torch.
I'm Sergeant Poole with the Community Health and Safety section. So my unit pertaining to the subject consists of one officer, Officer Burke, and we also partner with Compass Health. And we have a care coordinator, Heather, who does short-term care plans. So what we typically do is we work with the court. So that's where we get some individuals that would like to work with us, where we can assist them to go to detox, treatment, get housing, anything that they really need. A random thing that's recent is birth certificates. A lot of individuals ask us to help them get their birth certificate. And then Officer Burke will go out to camps, he walks parks, and it's contacting those homeless or substance use disorder individuals that are in our community to start building relationships with them. Most of them know who we are and know that we can help them when they're ready. And so he just constantly responds to calls or problem areas or camps that are within our city to move them along and also offer services.
Good evening, everyone. I am Lauren Davis, State Representative for the 32nd Legislative District, which includes Lynnwood, a good chunk of Southwest Snohomish County and Northwest King County. I am going to set a 5-minute timer for my loquacious self. I have a lot to share. So, first of all, thank you for putting this on tonight, and to the wonderful fellow panelists. And I especially want to thank the first responders and treatment providers that I'm sitting next to for doing incredibly meaningful, life-saving work every day. I'm sitting betwixt people who I know do chest compressions on people overdosing, and people who provide prescribed life-saving medications, and they should all be applauded for their work. So from the legislative perspective, those 3 topics, homelessness, substance use disorder, and mental health, it's not hyperbole to say that those were the 3 primary focuses of this last legislative session, and hence the timer. There's a lot to say, but at a really high level, I want to first begin with this concept. When we think about the intersection of behavioral health and public safety, there's a model that we've used a lot in public policy that I find pretty helpful. It's called the sequential intercept model, and essentially it lays out a trajectory of all the points that an individual might intersect with the criminal legal system. So intercept 0 is actually sort of prior to that engagement. So that might be someone who's in the community who's not necessarily having a law enforcement contact yet. Intercept 1 would be that initial interaction with an officer, which may or may not result in an arrest. Intercept 2 is going to be that initial court appearance, so kind of release, pretrial release, arraignment, and it goes on from there. Then you've got people who are in jail, all the way to intercept 6, which is people who are actually sentenced. And the big idea is that for individuals whose criminogenic behavior is driven by an underlying behavioral health condition, and again, behavioral health is just an umbrella term that encompasses both mental health and substance use disorder together, that those individuals will be provided with off-ramps from the criminal legal system and on-ramps into treatment and recovery pathways at every intercept. That's sort of the big vision. And with the idea that there's accountability built in, and if the person is not being, receptive to or participating in treatment and recovery services, but continuing to endanger public safety, persons or property, then they'll still be given additional opportunities, but those opportunities might occur as part of a pretrial arrangement, or they might occur in custody, or they might occur as part of sentencing. We have therapeutic sentencing alternatives such as DOSA, which is the drug offender sentencing alternative. We also create a mental health sentencing alternative. So that at a really high level, I do want to mention, check my time, two very large kind of legal quandaries that have taken a lot of the legislature's time on this issue. One is Blake, which I'm happy to talk about more later to the extent that folks have questions. I think people are probably aware, in the middle of the 2021 legislative session, the Supreme Court actually voided the RCW, the state statute that regulates drug possession, and so overnight it became lawful essentially for a 12-year-old to possess a kilo of methamphetamine was effectively legal. So the legislature acted with sort of like, bubblegum and duct tape to stick something together for a 2-year period that expired July 1, forcing ourselves to act in the 2023 legislative session. We did act. The legislature increased the criminal penalty from a misdemeanor for possession to a gross misdemeanor, and also removed 2 required pre-arrest diversions that had previously existed in law. There were also significant behavioral health investments in that bill I'm happy to talk about. The other bill that's really worth noting, and it was recently in the paper, the state has been appropriately chastised for letting individuals with serious mental illness languish in correctional facilities without care, and that body of work is known as True Blood because that is the name of the lawsuit. Unfortunately, in the state, we have a tendency to legislate by lawsuit, so it's sort of like whack-a-mole. We get in trouble for this, education, we got sued, pump some money over here, and now we're getting sued over mental health, pump some money over here. It's not particularly efficient, but True Blood is the latest example. These are individuals who are found, their competencies in question, so it's unclear if they're capable of participating in their own defense or understanding the charges against them, and under our Constitution, you cannot proceed with criminal prosecution if a person lacks competency. So people who are deemed in need of an evaluation, or if they are deemed incompetent in need of what's called competency restoration, which takes place in an inpatient facility, we have failed to meet timelines associated with both of those standards, and they've actually gotten worse despite the lawsuit. So I have 11 seconds. I'm very passionate about these issues. This is also what I do for a living outside the legislature, and really excited to be here today.
I'm going to take Chief Langdon's lead here, and I'll just do a little high-level introduction, but I'll yield to Captain Picknell to my left, who is really the brains of our operation. My name is Joe Hughes. I'm a Deputy Chief of Emergency Medical Services for South County Fire. South County Fire is your guys' local fire department. As I said, we provide fire and emergency medical services. In regards to these subjects of behavioral health, addiction, and homelessness, the fire department is not immune from seeing these responses. We often think that it's a law enforcement issue, but when people call 911, it either goes to law enforcement or it goes to the fire department. And so the fire department captures, quite a bit of these 911 calls in regards to these situations. And we've experienced a gap. We're starting to close that gap, and we're doing a great job of closing the gap. But what the gap has been is, when the fire department responds for a 911 call for an emergency medical services incident, whether it be a behavioral health issue or a homeless person or somebody experiencing and living with addiction, what we can do is we can do one of two things. One of them is to take them to the hospital, which isn't necessarily always the best thing to do for them. The emergency department doesn't necessarily need to get inundated with something where they have limited skill sets to deal with. We need to navigate these people to where they can actually get the help. The other option we have is to leave them at home. And sometimes that's not the best option either. So what we've done to close the gap, and I'll pass this over to Captain Picknell, is several years ago, South County Fire started the Community Resource Paramedic Program. And what's that? That is for more of our medical social work calls or these calls where we really need to find that gap, where taking them to the hospital isn't necessarily the best option for them or our hospital system, and leaving at home is not a viable option as well. So the community health, or the community resource paramedic program that South County Fire has really pioneered in our state, has been an outstanding program and is closing that gap. We still have more to do there. Our mission is certainly not complete, and we're always looking for opportunities to try to close that gap even more. And before I hand it to Captain Picknell here, we're grateful for the opportunity tonight to be here. And we're grateful for our communities that we partner with, or the partners in our community like Burton Health and Compass Health, and obviously the city of Lynnwood and some of the other cities that we serve in southwest Snohomish County. So I yield to you.
Hello, thanks Chief. So again, thank you for having us here tonight. This is a great space to allow to educate our residents and people that live in the community, and also give you guys some opportunity of what you can do to support what we're doing so we can support you. I've been a paramedic and a firefighter for 30 years, and I'm a captain now over the Community Resource Paramedic Division. And let me just explain what that is. When people call 911, we have a really high amount of people that call, and they're looking for something else. They're looking for their mental health counselor. They're looking for detox. They're homeless and they need a home. It's a senior that's fallen, and we really need to find them better living conditions, or a caregiver. That is extremely common for us because everyone calls 911. In the past, our only answer was the emergency room. And our emergency rooms are pretty full. And now you have a heart attack, or there's a fire down the street. Your medic unit, your ambulance, or your fire engine might be on someone that fell, and that they're very important, but they just need help up. But what we really need is to get them a caregiver, or into a home, or get a hold of their family. So what the Community Resource Paramedic or Mobile Integrated Health Division does is we follow up after a crew's been there. They say, hey, Mrs. Smith down the road, she needs some help. Or John over here was homeless and he really wants a home. Or someone else overdosed and we want to get him services. We follow up where they're at. If I take them into the ER, what happens is they might have a social worker talk to them, and they might leave before anybody talks to them, or the social worker gives them some papers and they go home and they don't act on that number, or they don't make that connection, or they don't have a phone, and they will end up back in the ER. And that affects all of us. So we go to the site, we go into their home, to the homeless camp, on the corner, it's just one on the corner, just up here, and we find them where they're at. And then our goal is to get them to the right resource immediately. So the ER is not it. So I want to get them we get them into the detox beds. I want to get them straight into mental health facilities. I can, not my medic unit, but I can take them to their mental health clinician up the street. I can drive them to their doctor. We have one, I just got prescriptions for someone that their insurance wouldn't pay for, and he's been out of his medicines for 3 days. So these are the kind of things that Community Resource Paramedic does, and it saves an ambulance and a fire engine from going, and it saves some space in the ER. And I got the person their medicine so that they could stay at home. So these are really important teams in the field. And we're really lucky here because we have 4 24-hour community resource paramedics. That's one per shift. So you have a 24-hour service. We are about to put on some care coordinators. We do partner with Compass currently for a behavioral health specialist, but we're gonna change that to care coordinators that help us find these connections. And they call them community health workers. They live in the community, they find community resources, and we close the gap so they have what they need besides going back in and out of the ER. Where else was I going? Oh, I'm really happy that I'm sitting next to a legislator, because some of the stuff that we could do as a community is we could use some more detox beds. We could use some more housing. We could use the ability in the state to allow paramedics to actually take them straight to mental health facilities and detoxes. That's kind of a tricky thing that allows us to do that. It has to be me, it can't be an ambulance. We could use some crisis intervention teams. There's a designated crisis responder that goes in and helps people in crisis. our fire department people and police officers are going to that daily. So we could actually use our teams to do that, and kind of fire department and police kind of got left out of that. Our 988 system right now, we're already in the field. We'd be a great match with that 988 hotline, but currently that's not really what I'm told they're doing, but we'd love to be a part of that. So I just want you to be aware that the services that we provide, and we're really there, because firefighters and paramedics, they show up and they want to find a solution. And it's almost painful when my only solution is the ER and I know I'm gonna see him 6 hours later. Or the person says, this is pretty classic, I want detox. They sit in the ER and they don't get seen for 12 hours and they get tired and they don't feel well and they get released. And then I see them again and the next day. If I could take them straight to a place to get them the medication, or if I could bring it to them in the home, we might be able to get them right there with detox in the field and get them into a bed. And we bypassed the ER and we got them when they really wanted it. So that's what I'd like to see this world come to, is where we bring it to them where they're at. And that's what our division does. And I will say, our division does work on grants. So we have North Sound ACH and Verdant, and we wouldn't be able to do this program without our partners that support us with grants. Was I the longest?
Quick addition, something that's actually, real quick, something that we just started here in the last month or so is a program with the Narcan League behind, and that has been supported by Verdant Health and the Snohomish County Health Department. And it's a really unique opportunity for us to identify where the addiction is and help give them that antidote, that Narcan, that can reverse the effects of the overdose. We've already started distributing it through our ACT classes, which is a public outreach or community outreach program we have, which stands for Antidote, CPR, and Tourniquet. Antidote in that being the Narcan. So that's one of the ways that we're penetrating the community to get that Narcan into the hands of the community so we can prevent bad outcomes from overdose.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you all of you for that. We also wanted to thank our executive assistant, Lisa Harrison, for helping put all this together for us today. And I wanted to introduce you to some other council members who are in the room as well. We have Councilmember Jim Smith here, and Councilmember Decker, and we have Councilmember Sutton, and we have School Board Member Deb Kilgore here. Did I miss any other elected officials who are here? Okay, so now what we're gonna do, if you have a question for one of the panel members, please raise your hand. This is your chance.
I would like the cards of everyone.
You would like the
Their
cards
business
of
cards.
everyone, the
Except
business
for
cards.
this one, and that one. In particular.
That's a good start. If you have cards, please leave them. Maybe we can even leave them on the table.
Shannon, we also have this contact.
Oh, we also have because of the roundtable the city council did a couple weeks ago, we were able to put together not only these individuals, but a variety of experts in the area that came to talk to us. We have a contact sheet that we're happy to give you. We want you to have it. Please share it, share it, share it. Would you like to ask a question?
This is kind of a statement, and John Judd, Lynnwood, Washington resident for some 50 years. I had an interesting event today on my way home from the airport, dropping a friend off to go back to Bozeman. Well, on the corner just north of Daleway Park, there was an individual who was obviously having some kind of an episode, and he was proceeding to think that he was a traffic conductor in the middle of the street with no shirt on. So, I realize there are numbers, but going back to your statements about what is an appropriate way to use the resources the best way so that we're not spending resource in improper ways, and so that we're also allowing the client, I use the term client, to get the best kind of access and outcome.
And which one of them would you like to answer? Anyone?
If you would. Either of the police or the fire.
Well, I'll give it a shot first, and
Sure,
then maybe I
appreciate
can
it.
pass it on down. So I think the first thing in maybe that situation is I would recommend calling 911, because you want the first responders to go out there and vet that the scene is safe, rather than maybe somebody going and taking the initiative themselves for a situation like that, especially in the middle of traffic, and you don't know if this person's in crisis or not. So if you identify this, that it's a potential danger to the person and the rest of the community, my recommendation would be call 911. Let us go out there and determine if determine that it's a safe spot for us to operate in, and then we can navigate that person to the correct resource.
Thank you.
Yes. No, I agree, 911's always first, and something we'd like to have in this county that's been working elsewhere is a nurse navigator line where they would call, and let's say you find out a little more information, and this is John, and John's like, I'm okay, you know, this is my normal, I don't wanna go. The nurse navigator might be able to help us or send our team to come to John and then say, okay, John, where do you really wanna go? Like, you know, who is it that you normally see? Where do you get your medicines? And so we could direct him. 911's always the first place, because the things we don't know, is this normal for him or is this new for him?
Sure.
And then even if my crew shows up and they find out, oh, we know John, you know, John doesn't wanna go to the ER, then they would call my team in. I release that engine to go to the fire and the heart attack, and then I stay with John and help him for however many hours that takes. So that's definitely how that system works.
Sure, I'll just add, I mean, I think actually what you're touching on is thematic of this conversation, because the acuity of the situation you described certainly warrants a 911 response, but the type of person you described is, you know, sort of the types of folks we're interacting with all the time. Sure. I think one of the themes that you can pluck out of this conversation is case management is being done through a lot of disparate programs. So Ashley talked about the LEAD program. That is ostensibly an intensive case management model. What you're doing with your mobile health, I'm going to name it inappropriately, but that work, right, helping people with all these follow-ups, and that's doing that kind of intensive case management work. And the reason that you're starting to see a flurry of that type of work is because individuals like the gentleman you described historically are taken to the ED and then discharged, maybe with a piece of paper of some instructions, right, that they may or may not have a phone to call, or will lose the piece of paper, or don't feel like they have the agency to assert themselves to access those resources, or transportation to access those resources. And so the legislature has also been pumping a lot of money into the sorts of programs, statewide expansion of the LEAD model under the umbrella, it's called the Recovery Navigator Program, but effectively a statewide expansion of intensive case management. We've pumped, that we funded at $45 million. We pumped $12.5 million into what's called the HOST program, which is Homeless Outreach Stabilization Transition, also an intensive case management model for folks with serious mental health challenges. This population that we're discussing has always popped up in emergency care, 911 response, and correctional settings routinely. What we have failed to do is assist them upon release from emergency departments, correctional facilities. And so we've been doing a lot in the legislature to that end for folks like that individual to try to do that follow-up. Even 988 was mentioned, but we're starting to do actually follow-up calls. So people who call 988 and are given resources, calling back the next day and saying, were you able to access that resource to try to avert, you know, future crises? And while I'm on the subject, I'll just mention quickly, as it relates to the intersection of behavioral health and public safety, folks such as that gentleman, you know, may or may end up going to the emergency department or correctional facility. A large part of the reason that we see folks cycle routinely through our jails and our prisons is due to the lack of any amount of proper reentry planning and care coordination on the way out the door. And that's a real missed opportunity, because people often have stabilized to some extent while incarcerated. And just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services approved Washington's 1115 waiver, and while what that means is actually quite significant, it means that we will be able to fund with federal Medicaid dollars care coordination services 30 days prior to individuals releasing from custody, and for the first 30 days of custody on the front end. So for the first time, we'll actually be able to pay for proper care coordination, and it won't largely be on the state's dime, it's largely on the federal dime. So we'll be able to kind of capitalize on those interactions with a hospital or a correctional facility and try to avert future interactions. So that's optimistic, but even that, I was on a meeting about it today, we got the waiver, but they don't anticipate we'll be able to do that in the 58 jails statewide until 2025, because from a practical standpoint, there's just so many layers of federal approval and planning and such, but there's some optimism there.
I'll just add that when our jail opens, we will have our care coordinator being able to go with anyone that wants assistance for care coordination, then she will be able to access our jail and work with them. Same within the court system, anyone that requests through the public defenders, or if the prosecutors request it, she's up there every day on Mondays. And then if they request her to be up there, then she will go up there and meet with clients then and there.
I think that you raised your hand, right?
So on Facebook, there was a person that said they wanted to go to Super Living, but they needed to pay $3,000 to end their lease, $1,000 to get into the Super Living, and they put up a GoFundMe. So I wonder, do we have any resources to help with that?
Yes, Colin, you should be receiving an email from Councilmember Peterson, because he forwarded me your email about that very topic, and but I can tell you in real time, my response to him was, the Recovery Navigator programs actually, I would maybe talk to Ashley, but most of them have some flexible funding for individuals on a recovery pathway for a variety of needs, fixing a car part so they can get to treatment, or the recovery housing piece. And the second part, we do have precedent in the legislature. We created lease breaking for example, for victims of domestic violence to be able to break a lease. We do not currently have lease breaking for individuals who might need to go to inpatient treatment or matriculate into recovery housing, but I did start a conversation with Councilmember / Representative Peterson about that.
Other questions?
Mike Miller, Diane Miller, live in Lynnwood, 98036. We're here tonight to thank the police force. On Monday, the 3rd, at 7:35 p.m., we were attacked on a walk by a man with a baseball bat. And the response was extremely fast. Thank you. Before we finished the 911 call, your guys were there. It was a very professionally done response. They were able to apprehend this person a couple hours later. And so, thank you very much.
Glad to hear. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Estella Carrera Infante. I have a son that is 42 years old that has mental health issues and drug addiction and also brain damage. I had already planned to come here tonight before an incident happened last night, and I called 911. He was acting up and wouldn't go to sleep and was pounding on the door, trying to fix this doorknob because he has a phobia about people going in his room or cameras or things. And I did call 911 because I couldn't get to sleep and he wouldn't stop pounding. And I was told they couldn't do anything about it because he wasn't harming me, he wasn't doing anything, that they couldn't make him do anything, but they didn't offer anything else. And I'm not here to complain, I'm just seeing that there is a lot of help. And yet I was not directed to anything like that last night. I was just told, are you safe, ma'am, are you safe? And I said, well, yes, I'm safe, I know my son. Well, there's not much we can do about it. There's other issues other incidents that are happening that are more severe. My son is on the path to homelessness if I don't protect him. I am his caregiver, but yet last night was something that really touched me. And like I said, I had already seen that this was gonna be on, and I had already decided I was gonna come. And then this comes up last night, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I couldn't get to sleep. I had commitments this morning, and I couldn't attend to them because I was so tired. And so I'm glad to know, and I'm glad that there is a list of resources that I can reach out to, because I'm sorry, but last night was not helpful at all. We can't make him do nothing, he's not hurting anybody, go somewhere where you're safe, and that's all I was told. And it's sad because I know it's happened to other people, so I'm glad that I came because I know that there is help out there. Thank you. And I think that's the other thing too, I'm sorry, is that what is the prevention? This is intervention, but what is the prevention? If I can see that my son is already approaching homelessness because of his behavior, yet he cannot be made to do anything. He's almost 5'11", weighs almost 200 pounds. Take him to Children's Hospital or something. How am I gonna take him to Children's Hospital? This huge 42-year-old, and he's over there mocking that the police isn't gonna do nothing, and sure enough.
This isn't so much relevant to the work I do now, but I spent 20 years in the community mental health system, and I noticed when I came up to work in Snohomish County that there's a serious lack of long-term residential treatment beds for people with chronic mental illness that will need support their entire life. It's such a huge burden on families to go through nights like you had. And there is room in the system for us to all fight for people to have programming and housing. It's congregate care housing, medication management, group therapy, residential case managers. These things have fallen by the wayside since the 90s. And I think it's time to put the funding back into these programs so that people like your son can have safe places to live. That is not such a burden on families, and then the next answer is not homelessness. So just recognizing that struggle.
Well, first of all, you're an amazing mom. If you don't hear that enough, you are. And, as far as, I'm sure you're from law enforcement, but law enforcement are, somewhat constructed, right? If there's not probable cause for a crime or they're not doing a peace officer involuntary transport, that's sort of their legal duties, right? But from a community response perspective, the appropriate response would have been a mobile crisis team. So we, just like everything else, we don't have enough of them, but we have been really trying, we the legislature, to invest significant amounts of dollars in mobile crisis teams. And they are multidisciplinary teams. They usually operate in pairs of 2. And that would be a very appropriate, like that type of response. And often they can de-escalate in the moment. They also do follow-up care. So it's typically a peer, so somebody with lived experience who's in recovery from behavioral health challenges paired with a clinician, most typically. And they can provide help and assistance in the moment, again, as well as checking in and creating care plans, to your point, kind of a preventative perspective. I'll address briefly the comment about, sort of can't make him do anything. While I don't know the details of your son's challenges or diagnoses, I do think it's worth noting the state does have provisions for civil commitment, also called involuntary treatment. The bar for initial detention to involuntary treatment under a mental health detention or a substance use disorder detention is incredibly high, too high in my opinion, and certainly last night your son would not have met criteria. But I do think it's worth noting that the state last year passed a provision that actually substantially lowers that bar for what's called assisted outpatient treatment, which is essentially compulsory outpatient treatment. We call it AOT, assisted outpatient treatment. And the legal threshold for that is merely within the preceding 36 months, this individual has presented on 2 or more occasions to a hospital or a correctional facility because of their behavioral health challenges. And I don't know if your son meets that particular criteria, but a lot of our population that we're talking about tonight, the majority would meet that criteria. And the idea is it's court-ordered treatment, but the penalty, if you will, of a revocation of that outpatient order is involuntary inpatient care. So it's entirely through the civil pathway, there are no criminal charges, and someone doesn't get sort of burdened with that criminal record, but they do get help and there is accountability. I will regrettably report we passed that bill in 2022. It went into effect July 1st of last year, and a year later there's not a single jurisdiction in the entire state implementing, and it's House Bill 1773. And so the legislature, we can write laws till the cows come home, but we create a floor, right? We make it lawful, but we need, Snohomish County Superior Court, we need local communities to come together, designated crisis responders, and actually where the rubber hits the road and kind of bring it to life, and that really hasn't happened, and I'd love to help community have a dialogue about that in South Snohomish County.
Representative Davis said it well, but I'm sorry that you had that experience, and I can tell you a lot of times our officers are as frustrated. When we are talking about mental health, that bar that is discussed there, for us to go and have any sort of intervention that could possibly escalate the situation, we're training our officers to back out if there's not that safety concern. Was 988 mentioned at all by either the dispatch center or the officers? Okay. Fairly new.
I never heard of 988.
Yeah.
Till now.
That might be worth a call as well. That's something that you could try in the future. I would also recommend that call to 911 to have officers come out and do that assessment.
I just wanted them to come and talk to him.
Yep.
Because I thought an authority figure would have an impact on him.
I hear you. So when was this and where was this? Was this in
This
Lynnwood?
was last night, and what was really odd was that they mentioned my apartment building. So it seemed to me like, oh, yeah, again, you know, that apartment building.
Got it.
And
Okay.
that bothered me,
Was this in Lynnwood?
yes.
Okay. Was it Lynnwood Police Department or was it Snohomish County Sheriff's Office or?
I don't know, I just called 911.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm sorry you had that experience. So-
And he was just beat up, like, about 6 months ago, his head was bashed in and everything, so he's freaked out about that. And so that's what creates a lot of these fears that he has. And so that's why it bothered me that they said, oh, this apartment building, like saying, oh, the calls come from there all the time.
Got it.
And that, it really, it just made an impact on me, because I thought that I'm not gonna be paying attention if I call again and something more drastic is happening.
Sure, well, maybe afterwards you can talk with Patrol Commander Pat Fagan right here, just so we can get a little more of the details on that, and see if it was our agency and see what happened and what we need to make sure we do better next time. The other thing I mentioned, speaking kind of what Representative Davis was talking about a year and a half ago, we applied for a grant and funded it for what's called the IMPACT program, which was that crisis response team of having a mental health professional go out there with us. They were unable to hire for the position. So there's still that staffing aspect to a lot of this. There's still a lot of programs that we'd like to bring back on board. We'd like to fully staff our community health and safety section.
And I've had them come out twice, and they find nothing wrong with them.
That was who that came out?
Not last night, but before, in the past.
Yeah.
The crisis center has come out.
It's really in the moment they have to look at it.
And,
So,
and in the moment, he acts like he's totally normal.
Right.
And his brain just functions in a way to where he can convince and sell you a rock for $1,000.
Right.
Because
Right.
he's just smart. I don't understand that kind of brain damage, but I have to understand it, but.
yeah. I'm sorry you're going through
Yeah,
that. So,
thank you.
yep.
Any more questions? No comments?
Hi, David Marshall from Lynnwood. I want to give Dr. Newton a chance to talk down at the end. I was at City Council on Monday when you were talking about the need for more nurses for staffing recovery beds. And I really appreciate Captain Picknell's point that we need more recovery beds, but then we also need more nurses to go with those recovery beds. So if you could talk a little bit about where we're at in the health profession, like why we have a shortage of nurses for the audience, and maybe what we can do to address that and get some more nurses for recovery beds in Lynnwood, because that would be great.
Thanks so much. We have 16 beds, and our beds are Medicaid beds. Strictly people who have Medicaid, right? So you think, well, that should be easy. We should have a full house. And every time I come in and the 16 beds are not filled, I think, wow, there's no problem in Snohomish County with drugs. Isn't that great, right? That's not the case. I can't staff it. COVID happened, and when COVID came, a lot of the nurses said, I'm gonna work from home, I'm gonna do telemedicine. And when they started to do telemedicine, the hospitals had to raise the rate to pay the nurses to come in to the hospital. So nurses would get a higher salary And non-for-profits, we can't compete with that. So we're not able to get nurses. If we're paying $40 an hour and the hospitals are paying 70, that's a tough reach, right? So it's been really hard to staff. And I actually was at the point where I was at Lynnwood City Council saying, can you help us with some nurses? Because if you can pay for some nurses, maybe I can raise the rate and get some nurses who, and it's also a group of people that we need people who actually care about our patients, it is a vulnerable population. You have to understand addiction because you can't say, what's wrong with you? You know, they're stuck using drugs. That's not the way it works. It's a very complex issue. There's a lot of mental health involved, and as you, with your son with an injury, you know there's a lot of mental health with addiction. What's the answer, I guess, right? We do have beds. We have 16 beds and they're not full. So I have to think why. And if I had more nursing, you guys could leave, could drop people off a lot more readily on a whim, you know? Oh, you've got an extra nurse, I can put another patient in there tonight. The man on the street corner who's waving and directing traffic probably has a methylphenol problem, and we'd be happy to take him in, but he has to want to go. So that's the next step. But getting the resources to staff and get more of these beds is part of the answer. And also getting them into rehabs. So, and, you know, detox is half the battle. The other part of that, and this is to the legislator also, we don't get payment with Medicaid for not even 5 days, we get 3 days. And it's a 7 to 10 day is what you need to detox someone off of fentanyl. Heroin, I could have done it in 5 days. I can't do it with fentanyl. You need 7 days, 7 to 10 days. And then if they can be off a drug for that long, I can give them that shot. I can give them that shot and they're not gonna overdose for the next month, at least I'm safe. We have 5 overdoses. We have 5, I guess I can't say overdoses, I can say drug-related deaths in Snohomish County every week. 5. That's not okay. You know, and we have things that we can do to help it. So if we can get people into the beds and get them the treatment that they need, and in a place that's gonna treat them well, and understand the addiction as an illness. We treat it like we would treat diabetes. That it is a diagnosis, it's an illness, it's a disease. And if we can treat it that way, we can cure it, but we have to get to behind it.
Well, first thing, I'll just my colleague. Yes, so I think people are probably aware, but yeah, people who are using fentanyl are needing a lot longer in withdrawal management or detox services than other folks. Happy to work on that issue. I've worked with Linda Grant, who's her CEO, for years. Medicaid also doesn't pay for the day of discharge for detox, and so if you're only there for 5 days, we pay you for 4, and that's less of a problem if you're in a 28-day inpatient. It's more of a problem if your turnaround is 5 days, so that's a federal rule. I already did that for Linda. But regarding workforce, I thank you, David, for raising that. So nursing is huge, but it's every position. So it's substance use disorder professionals, it's mental health counselors of every variety, and I really can't underscore enough the gravity of the workforce challenges that we're facing. So to use pediatric beds as an example, so adolescent behavioral health beds, we've got only about 60% of the physical beds. Like, we've built the beds, we have the capital budget, you know, we've funded the buildings, and the beds can't be staffed, they can't be opened, beds of all types, mental health, substance use disorder beds, recovery housing, because we don't have staffing for those. That story repeats over and over. And so in our capital budget, we keep trying to build all of these facilities, which is lovely, but if you don't have the pipeline, you have a problem. And so a few things that the legislature has done, which we do hope will help. We've invested significantly in loan forgiveness for folks going into behavioral health. We created an apprenticeship program, so not dissimilar to what you have if you were going into the trades, like the construction trades, for example, an apprenticeship for individuals working in behavioral health professions. We've also reduced the hours, so the number of hours required to be fully licensed for certain behavioral health professionals. the Healthcare Authority has a program, I think it's called startyourpath.org, but to try to encourage people to get into this. But at the end of the day, the primary reason by far that we have this behavioral health workforce crisis is actually just because of rates, because of money, and I hate to oversimplify, but in this case it's true. The rate that we pay providers like Evergreen Recovery Centers who serve Medicaid clients, so our low-income adults and young adults, are incredibly low. And in the 2022 legislative session, in recognition of that, we increased Medicaid rates by 7%. And I'm explaining this just for the purpose of it's illustrative, I think, about why people get frustrated that things aren't happening. So the providers they receive a pittance for the care that they provide, and they receive so little, they can turn around and pay very little to their staff, which is why they have trouble recruiting and retaining staff. So the legislature, recognizing that, took your tax dollars and we said, fine, we're gonna increase Medicaid rates by 7% with the intention that the providers can turn around and pay more. Well, here's what actually happened. So Medicaid is run through a system of actuarials who do a bunch of bean counting and determine the cost of business. And because these facilities are so understaffed, the number of care encounters were down. So less people were getting served because there was less staff to serve them. So the actuarials said, well, the need is low, the demand is low. Look at your encounters are down. There's less people in inpatient, there's less people in outpatient. And so they issued a 7% cut to providers because they needed less money because the demand was down. And so our 7% got eaten up just to balance out the 7% cut that they were receiving. So, I mean, I get that was just really in the weeds, but it's very challenging to work in the Medicaid world, and things have to be actuarially sound. This year, we took a different tact, and we actually the legislature did a 15% Medicaid rate increase, so historic, and we are using a different sort of workaround mechanism to ensure that funding gets directly to the providers and sort of bypasses the issue that I just described, so that they can turn around and actually pay nurses what they deserve, pay substance use counselors what they deserve. But we were talking about behavioral health workforce crisis for at least the last decade, but during COVID, we lost about 30% of our existing behavioral health workforce, so it's pretty dire.
So I also just want to mention that we are running into issues with sober housing and affordable housing. So for example, we had a male that completed treatment, and he was able to get into sober housing. We put him in a hotel for 2 weeks, and then he was able to transition. We had a female that completed treatment. We put her in a hotel for 4 months, and she was still unable to find sober housing. So we also, if we have a wish list, we also need more sober housing. If we were able to fill these detox beds, next would be, we need to put them into sober housing. If we can't find them and put a house to put them in, then they're gonna be back on the street, back with their normal crowd, back in a normal environment where they're gonna relapse.
We did put $10 million toward that.
We've talked a lot about behavioral health so far. I would love to hear what the panel's thoughts are for Lynnwood on how we can help our homeless population and what types of services and housing needs that your Lynnwood city representative should be looking into and improving in the near future to help us as we have the light rail coming to us. So we have a huge population growth. So I would love to hear from you guys about what your thoughts are for that.
Working in the field and having 24-hour staff, one thing that would be supportive is facilities that are open 24 hours for us to access. There was the crisis center, right, in Everett, and that was a place that people could go for 5 days for mental health care. They would take people on substances. They're closed now because they lost their building. But outside of that, for 24 hours when somebody needs something on the weekends or in the evenings, it really does come down to the ER again, unless I can have a person wait till the next morning. So we've always said if we could have some of the facilities that Everett and King County have, we don't have them in South Snohomish. We don't have, like there's the Carnegie Center up in Everett, but that's a good transport that officers or fire department people are taking people there. We just don't have that in this central location. So I think it's 24-hour services and some of those right here, so we don't have police officers driving them to Everett and again, it's not medic units, it's our team, but we can use that closer for sure.
I'm sorry for being such a mic hog. The legislature does admittedly play a fairly large role in some of these topics, and I appreciate the question. So I think the first thing is to make sure that we're not treating individuals experiencing homelessness as a monolith, that we're actually segmenting that population. When we think about family homelessness, the number one driver of family homelessness is domestic violence, and ensuring that we had a number of capital budget requests for additional shelter facilities. I was able to get some additional monies, not a ton, like $3 million for housing for families experiencing domestic violence or fleeing domestic violence situations. One of the, I think, even in the legislature, I think one of the most common misconceptions is that individuals experiencing chronic homelessness, which is by no means all of the homeless population, but I think a lot of the folks we're discussing tonight might fall into that category. A lot of folks, even very well intentioned, think that the correct intervention for all folks is permanent supportive housing, and that's incredibly important. The legislature has put billions of dollars into this housing trust fund to build permanent supportive housing, and that is really important. But that is really important for folks who might have serious mental illness or SMI, so like schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorders, bipolar with psychotic features, people who might have co-occurring traumatic brain injury like we heard about, people who might have a co-occurring a variety of conditions or medical conditions. For individuals who have a primary substance use disorder, the majority of folks, for example, who might be using fentanyl, have a primary substance use disorder, and their secondary disorder is something like depression or anxiety. And for those individuals, many of whom are experiencing homelessness, the appropriate intervention is actually not permanent supportive housing. These are individuals who are highly capable of working, highly capable of paying rent in recovery housing or sober living, and in fact, that becomes foundational to recovery. So for those individuals, it's a totally different intervention. It's about giving them something we funded this year, $7.5 million worth of 90-day housing vouchers for folks discharging from jail or treatment, to give them that runway and then get that job, and that helps with purpose, structure, and routine, all of which are foundational to keeping the disease of addiction in remission. So we really need to think about a very highly segmented approach for individuals, and admittedly, I find myself a little bit of a minority sometimes because there's so much focus on permanent supportive housing to the exclusion of recovery housing, and I'm of the radical belief that people can do recover from the disease of addiction. I see it every day.
Where to begin? So we also have a high population of elderly that are homeless, that are living in their vehicles, and they get Social Security. The Social Security is not enough to even afford a room to rent. If they choose to go to an old folks home, even though they can take care of themselves, they are allotted $100 a month, so then they do not want to. So we need a solution for that. A lot of our individuals that are homeless on fentanyl, they know where to go for help. They're like, yeah, maybe. So what do they need? Which maybe there's users out there that have become clean, that know what the key is to convince these individuals to actually want to get help, because we have the means to help them, but they also have free will where they're not taking our hand and letting us help them. So why not? What is that key? Is it because fentanyl is so cheap, so it allows them to just keep using it beyond the street? We need individuals to come forth and kind of educate us on this is why I was on fentanyl for so long, and this is what changed my mind and had me get clean.
I'm just expanding on, I think these answers were already mostly my thoughts, but for many of our clients, so I'm speaking specifically about people who are chronically homeless because that's the population we're serving. We actually just had 2 clients this week move into housing after one of them had been homeless for 30 years, the other for 7. So the change was drastic for them, and the move was huge. And our staff were actually very slow to tell their clients that they had been approved for housing because they actually were unsure if they really wanted it. It was a drastic change in their life, in their structure, in what they had been doing before and how they'd been living before. And so understanding that there may be different types of steps that a person can take to get to housing, I think that it's important that we're creative about the types of housing we offer. So for one of these participants who received housing, she first moved from being literally homeless on the street into a pallet shelter. And that was a slow transition for her to lay her head on a mattress and have her own things and be within her own four walls. And she was okay with that. So then to move to an apartment next was a very big jump for her. And I think that's important to really recognize that just putting a roof over someone's head is not resolving all the other challenges and issues that are going on. So that's kind of what we see on our end for what has worked for our clients and what we hope to see more of for sure.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. All right.
I would like to go back to her comment. I'm sorry I don't remember your name, but I'm Alicia, and I'm having concerns with the court system. This has been since December. I have a child. I refuse to lose my child. I'm not going to lose her to anyone again. We went through this in the school system. We got through it. She was doing well until December of last year, and got into the court system due to alcoholism, and has just been nothing but a problem since then. She does well. She went that one time in December, was doing really well. But the problem now is every effort that the family makes to help her, the court destroys it. And she has an attorney, kind of said that. She got on probation, and now there's political issues between her and the probation officer, because no one wants to say, maybe the probation officer isn't perfect. None of us are perfect, but you don't blame your client for it. She did everything, working. Basically, she has a problem because she's a leader, and you don't get to lead when you're in jail, okay? And I think that's wrong. It's just plain wrong. I'm sorry if no one agrees with it. The attorney said all of this to the judge, and she still said no. Now, here's a person that's 33, has a job. She has to be a leader because she's an IC. But the court doesn't consider that independent contractor, sorry. So you have to get your own jobs, you have to contract, you have to fulfill the contract, you have to secure everything yourself. So you better be a leader, or you don't work. So this is a conflict, as I have tried to explain to the attorney, between her and the probation officer. So now she's in jail. Why, is my question. Why? She's losing her job, she's losing her apartment that she's been able to maintain. I finally found someone to try to help her to keep the apartment. But, oh, you are not the person, so you can't help. Really? I'm a family member. I am trying to help. I'm trying to prevent homelessness. I'm trying to prevent drug addiction, where it gets to the point, you said they don't come, they don't help, because their brain has deteriorated to the point where they can't accept the help and don't know that they need the help. I'm trying to prevent that with my child. Now, she has a sister that's a doctor. She's a anesthetist, works in ER, so she's helping us understand all of this. You don't want her to get to that point where she's always in ER and different things. So my position is, who can help me, okay? How can I help the attorney to reason with the court? She can't afford to stay in jail for another month. What good is it doing? How is that going to help her from drinking 4 glasses of wine? She admitted to it. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I was stressed out about the court hearing. You put a warrant out for me. I have to leave the house to go to work every day. I'm scared to come in the house. I paid the warrant. Took the money I made, paid the warrant, and you still sent me to jail and helping me to lose my home. So what do I do? So my position is I'm going to have to do something. I can't just sit here and let this happen to my child. You can't wait for help because it may never come. So I have to do the next steps that I think are appropriate. And some people are going to be upset. So my answer is, these are a lot of resources. So when she gets out in a couple of weeks, who can help me to help her find housing, or now help me to help her to keep her apartment? There's people that want to help her. They'll pay the rent, they'll help her. But because she can't sign the paperwork, because I cannot talk to the jail, because they have someone called GTL that handles their phone stuff, and every time I talk to them, it's like, well, we don't think it's your phone number. What? I pay for this phone. And they're like, well, someone else is using your phone. So it's just one problem after the other is what I'm saying. So yes, we need some assistance. In the meantime, we're doing everything that we can also. So some feathers are gonna be ruffled, sorry.
Thank you for sharing. Who would like to speak on that?
Can you tell me which jail she's in?
Right here in Everett.
In Snohomish County Jail? Okay.
Yes.
It's certainly possible that our lead program can support her, so let's talk afterwards and I can see if we
I would
can connect with
appreciate
her.
it. Thank you so much.
You
She's
bet.
a terrific person. The other thing I wanted to say is they keep saying, oh, you're so highly intelligent, to the point that she said, I don't want to hear it. I don't need to hear that. My intelligence comes from within me. I don't need it out there. Or if you think that, why are you incarcerating her? For what? How is she getting help while she's there? She's a great student. She's in school as well, going to work and is in school, maintaining an apartment. You know, so what else can you do?
You're right, it's incredibly frustrating. We'd be happy to talk about how we can help and support her, for sure.
I
Thanks
would
for
appreciate
advocating
it.
for her.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for joining us, and thanks to the community for coming out and asking questions. Our time is up. What we would really love is if you could fill out the card for us, just so we can get some feedback for you and share with the city council. And that's it for this evening, and look for the next Let's Talk About Safety in a couple months.